What is the state of Ukrainian troops in Bakhmut? It sounds like the pressure is on and they are feeling it from all sides. Let's talk a little bit and look at some interviews from the front lines in Bakhmut as to what the soldiers are thinking, feeling, and going through. Let's get into it. So this is coming to us actually from the sun.
Defending the eastern city of Bakhmut are facing increasingly strong pressure from Russian forces, British military intelligence said Saturday.
So I want to point out this is pretty typical. This is them digging an entrenched position. You also saw some footage there back here of an individual running along this roadway here. Let's talk for a second. I want to point out where this is. If you've been following along on my daily updates, you already know this is almost certainly 503, the only clear highway coming out of Bakhmut. Let's take a look here. You can see here, right, there's two ways out of Bakhmut. One is H32, the other 506, and both of them are dangerously close to Russian forces. So chances are, I think this is probably, if I had to guess, I'd say probably 506, but tough to, well, no, it's probably H32 because you can see there's a number of like wooded areas here, though it could be inside on the outskirts of the city itself. But you guys can see that there is really no safe way out of Bakhmut, and it's not clear how far along Ukrainian efforts to withdraw from Bakhmut are going.
Eastern city of Bakhmut are facing increasingly strong.
You can see they're digging new entrenched positions.
Could be heard in Reuters footage showing Ukrainian soldiers digging trenches on Bakhmut's outskirts.
Right, and this is probably preparing defensive positions for Ukrainian forces, either who have recently been pushed back or who have, for example, out here, they could also, of course, be preparing defensive positions for Ukrainian forces to fall back to. But digging trenches, especially in this war, and honestly in most wars, is kind of a definitional thing for soldiers. It is a way to effectively protect yourself against all manner of enemy ordnance. Even in Vietnam, right, the North Vietnamese were legendary for their ability to dig individual and group fighting positions that would effectively stop even things like B-52s and heavy U.S. ordnance.
The battle here has raged for 7 months. A Russian victory in the city, which has been blasted to ruins, would give Moscow the first major prize in a costly winter offensive. Ukraine is reinforcing.
Calling it a major prize, again, is generous. It's mostly a symbolic prize at this point. We need to, I just need to point that out because this level of hype is not appropriate for Bakhmut. It's become a symbolic prize for Russia because it's a symbol primarily for the Wagner group. You notice that when things were going badly in Bakhmut, Yevgeny Prigozhin, the head of the Wagner group, couldn't be seen or heard doing anything but complaining and pretending like Wagner was not involved. Now that things are going well for them, of course he is, showing up in TikToks every single day wearing camo and a helmet like he's a soldier. Prigozhin, to be clear, has never served in the military and is a chef, or he owns a catering company, which there's some rumors that it was a catering company. But when we look at the overall situation, guys, remember, this is Bakhmut. This is the entire area. You cannot, this war is not going to be won in Bakhmut. It's not going to be, Bakhmut is not the decisive point of this conflict. You can see clearly here, it has not become the gateway to anything else. There are literally, here's Bakhmut, here is another city in Donbas, Kostiantynivka. It seems much larger than Bakhmut. Chasiv Yar seems comparable in Bakhmut in size. You can see Siversk is roughly Bakhmut sized. I point this out so that you guys recognize that there's a lot of ink spilled about Bakhmut. It is not the jewel of anything. Okay. It is purely symbolic.
forcing the area with elite units, while regular Russian army and forces of the private military Wagner Group have made further advances into Bakhmut's northern suburbs, the British Defense Ministry said in its daily intelligence bulletin. The Ukraine Armed Forces General Staff said in a Facebook post late on Saturday that Russian troops were trying but failing to surround Bakhmut.
So you can see this is actually pretty significant. This looks like the route into Chasiv Yar, and it's important because it obviously reflects some commanding heights. Understanding the terrain is key to this sort of operation. And you can basically see here that you have Chasiv Yar itself, and then you have Bakhmut. And you can see on the map, as a general rule, even when there's not terrain lines, water pools in low ground. So you can see that this is probably lower ground here. This is lower ground up here. So actually, Chasiv Yar may itself be actually a lower ground area. You can see there's the river running here. So it's not really clear that one area is conferring a significant tactical advantage versus another.
Defenders had repelled numerous attacks in and around the city. The British Defense Ministry said 2 key bridges have been destroyed within the last 36 hours, adding that Ukrainian-held resupply routes out of the city are increasingly limited.
Okay, one thing I want to point out about this conflict that's totally bizarre and bananas to me, everyone's using OCP. It was literally designed by the U.S. 10 years ago in Afghanistan, and now the Ukrainian forces, the Foreign Legion, Russian forces, they're all wearing it.
Artillery pounded the last routes out of Bakhmut on Friday, with the founder of Russia's Wagner.
See, he's wearing a U.S.-designed camo pattern. I get it. It's a great pattern.
Wagner Group Yevgeny Prigozhin saying in a video it published that the city was practically surrounded and that Kyiv's forces had only one road out left. On Saturday, Prigozhin published another video showing what he said were coffins containing the bodies of Ukrainian soldiers being repatriated to territory held by Kyiv. Russia says Bakhmut would be a stepping stone to completing the capture of the Donbas industrial region, one of Moscow's most important objectives.
Yeah, it is a stepping stone, right? And don't blow this up to be more than it is. I think that's really important. What I also think is important is actually some of this reporting from the Kiev Independent. And this is a Ukrainian publication that is, it truly is independent. It's obviously pro-Ukraine, but it acknowledges that there appear to be either some failures within the units being sent, the Ukrainian units being sent to Bakhmut, that many of the infantrymen talk of unprepared, poorly trained battalions being thrown to the front line to survive as best they can, with little support from armored vehicles, mortars, artillery, drones, or tactical information. We don't get any support, says one soldier who's been fighting in the front lines of Bakhmut. He's in his 40s. Russian artillery, infantry fighting vehicles, personnel carriers sometimes are allowed to strike Ukrainian positions for days or hours without being stopped by Ukrainian heavy weapons. There's poor coordination and situational awareness. This is unfortunately a pervasive thing in warfare. Mortarman spoke of extreme ammunition scarcity and using World War II era weapons, also pretty common in this conflict. Drones are scarce and are being lost at high rates in some parts of the battlefield. They said the battalion came in the middle of December, a total of 500 people, and a month ago they were down to 150. So, this is the problem that I think Ukraine is running into, in addition to Russia, is that there is a real problem as far as training, coordination. Russian attacks obviously have stepped up tremendously. There's 2 airborne brigades and Wagner. And they said it's just a constant wave after wave of assaults. Some say the Russian attacks have waves of cannon fodder, but some describe the enemy as likely to send a team of 3 or 4 expendable soldiers to attack and use that to force the Ukrainians to expose themselves by returning fire. And then more elite forces zero in on Ukrainian defenders' positions, striking with mortars, rockets, BMPs, or BTRs. And then they pound those positions, right? Send UAVs after them. And those more professional units on the Russian side that are running these mortars and UAVs, they are much more accurate. The important part that I do want to talk about is that oftentimes there isn't the mortar support, and I actually hypothesize that this is part of a withdrawal effort. We've talked about this in the daily updates. As forces withdraw through these two main highways, there's a problem, and that is that the highways are not actually all that secure. And so if you want to securely pass through these highways, you actually have to go on some dirt roads and goat trails, informal trails, to get there safely. And while individual soldiers can walk those trails, it's looks like it's maybe 10 kilometers, a less than a day's walk. The problem is that if you have heavy equipment, mortars, artillery, drones and batteries, communications, headquarters, those are all being packed up and moved away. And so when you have that, your mortar teams may not be able to provide support. If your mortar teams have been relocated to Chasiv Yar, there literally may not be mortar teams in this region here. And supposedly many elite Ukrainian units are also have been pulled out, and so it's not clear on who is left. Right, Ukrainian infantry is supposed to be mechanized, except for the TDF, but there's no BMPs, no artillery. Mechanized infantry on paper are just are light infantry in practice, and that they're complaining that the infantry vehicles appear at the rear lines but not at the front lines. And this is the reality. They are trying to save ammunition. They're trying to save ammunition, their mechanized forces to go on offense. There can't be a lot that's allocated to a controlled withdrawal. Logistics are poor. There's a lot of complaints, and some of these are soldiers' standard complaints that all soldiers are going to have. Working in a bureaucracy sucks, but a lot of soldiers are saying they barely have enough time to learn to shoot a rifle with just 2 weeks of training before they're dropped in some of the most intense battles of the war. Again, compare this to, say, the United States, where we train troops for 2 or 3 months, right? The standard basic combat training is 9 weeks. The shortest possible MOS is an additional 4 on top of that. So you're looking at least 3 months to get a light infantry private into the field. 2 weeks training is preposterous, right? And even if it's 2 weeks training is maybe sufficient if they have prior military experience as a refresher. But this is sort of the reality that they're dealing with. And the training pipeline is hard. It's hard to make those sort of calls. They said they shouldn't throw everyone in here. It's better to abandon these positions. It's better to properly train people. And I think they're right. We've talked about this. I truly think that the elite Ukrainian units are not in Bakhmut anymore. I think they've been relocated. I think they're preparing for an offensive that's imminent. I think they're sending unfortunately, they have to make these sort of calls as Russia makes these sort of calls. It looks at its least experienced troops. And the fact is, the best role for a troop with low levels of experience is on the defensive. It's very easy. Occupy a position, return fire if fired upon. There's not much maneuver warfare to take place. Ukraine can't afford to have its best units, its mechanized units in this fight. They just can't do it. They need to hold the Russians in place, get the Russians chomping at the bit to commit. Again, we've heard Russia has committed its elite airborne forces to this fight. And as we've talked about, you hope that Ukraine is preparing to have its own top tier forces conduct its major offensive operation wherever they choose to make this counterattack. So, of course, as we know, even Russia itself dealing with the same issues. UK intelligence, of course, is talking about how many, even Russia's elite tank forces are taking dated armored vehicles. Anyway, guys, that is today's video. Again, a little bit of a deep dive into Bakhmut. Of course, if you guys want access to the viral video breakdowns, the kind that YouTube definitely won't let me show you, I looked at the iconic trench video. We looked at we're probably going to this week take a look at the alleged war crime video. That's all going to be on the Patreon, and I do deep breakdowns of all of it. So thanks to our colonel and lieutenant tier patrons. Link to that's in the description, and I'll see you guys in the next one.